Hello. In episode 1 of this series, I mentioned that if you didn't nail your actor and item templates, it would be possible to modify them later using migration scripts. Today, we'll see why you shouldn't rely on it too much. But first of all, some disclaimers. This is going to be more of an intro video than a universal tutorial on the topic for two reasons. Even within a given system, the migration script will vary over the lifetime of the system, depending on what changes you need to make. Secondly, there's almost nothing built in to do that kind of work in Foundry, so I'm mostly going to copy and simplify what the D&D 5e system is doing. Another note, migration scripts are only mandatory if your system is published, used by other people than you, and you are a nice person who doesn't want to break other people's campaigns with your changes. But if it's just you, you have to balance the time spent writing the script versus making the changes by hand. Because of this, I don't really expect you to follow along on this one, but please watch the whole video before embarking into a migration, and I take no responsibility if you lose some hard work as a result of a botched world migration attempt. With that out of the way, let's get started. The first version of your system probably won't be perfect or even complete, so chances are you'll need to make modifications which might affect already created worlds. A simple example is adding a field to an actor type. Following the feedback from a tester, I need to modify the actor sheet in Foundry 2 so that players can keep track of the maximum amount of fortune points their character can have. This means I need to track it. In the character sheet template, in the stat block, I'm going to add another form input which is going to edit data.fortune.max. This property doesn't exist yet, so I'll need to add it to my template.json. After reloading my world, remember you need to go back to the setup after making template.json changes. If I create a new actor, we can see that the maximum fortune field is filled in, but that's not the case for an actor that existed prior to this change. Hello, editing Cedric here. Turns out this isn't true. As I was recording screen captures for this video, I realized that Foundry does in fact update actors, but not all of them, only the ones that don't have tokens for some reasons, which kind of messes up with my migration script. So for the sake of this video, we're going to assume that the fortune.max default value is set to an empty string rather than 7. This is where a migration script gets useful because there might be dozens of actors that need updating, and I don't feel like doing it by hand. The first thing we need to do is figure out whether a world needs updating. A simple way to do this is by comparing the latest version of the system with the version of the system the world was created with. Foundry doesn't automatically save that information, however, so I need to do this manually. Like in 5e, I'll register a system setting to store the system version number. The key elements here are that the scope of the setting is set to world and that config is set to false, so that it can't be modified by users. Next, we need to test this setting somewhere. Once again, copying 5e, I'll add a new hook into the system's main file. I'll be using hooks.once, and the event I'm going to listen to is ready. This is called when the world is done loading. First of all, we want to make sure that migrations can only be run by game masters, so we will return early if the current user isn't one. Next, we're getting the world's current system version. If there is none, it means that the world was created before we wrote this migration script, so it almost certainly needs a migration. If it does have a version number, then maybe it needs a migration. Not all system updates require a migration, and only you know if it does. For instance, after these changes, my system will be at version 0.07, so any version earlier than that will need migrating. I'm putting the migration threshold in a constant and use Foundry's convenience function isNewerVersion to compare the world's version and the system version. If the world's version is older than the threshold, or if there is no version number, then yes, we need to perform a migration. In which case, we'll call a function called migrateWorld, which we will create shortly. For brevity, I'll create the migration functions in the same file, but if you follow 5e's pattern, you may want to put that in a separate module. Okay, now to do the migration work. First, let's create a migrateActorData function, which will take an actor's document data as a parameter. As a reminder, the content of this function entirely depends on the kind of migration you need to do, so the code you need to write here might be completely different from mine. What I'm trying to achieve here is to copy the value of the fortune value property to the max value only if it isn't already set. To start with, I'm creating an empty updateData object that will contain the changes that will need to be applied to the actor. Only hero actor types have a fortune stat. So if the actor is of any type, I can return an empty object, meaning I'm doing nothing. Otherwise, I'm grabbing the actor's data, where its stats live, before checking if the actor has a max fortune property. If not, it's an actor that needs a migration, so I'm going to add a new entry in the updateData object, which corresponds to the path I need to update. In this case, data.fortune.max, and set it to the actor's current fortune value. That's the only change I need to make in this migration, so I can now return the updateData. Now that our actor migration function is complete, we can create the migrateWorld function, which, in essence, is just going to call migrateActorData on all the actors in the world before updating them for real. The thing is, actors can be found in many places. Obviously in the actor directory, but also inside compendia, and in scenes that contains tokens overriding the actor they come from. Let's start with the actor directory as it's the simplest one. For this one, we just have to loop through game.actor.contents, which is the list of actors in the actor directory, and call migrateActorData on each of them. If the function has generated any update, which we can check for using the foundry.utils.isObjectEmpty function, we can use it to update the actor via the usual update function. Next, let's turn to tokens located in scenes. As above, we're going to sift through a collection of documents, in this case game.scenes.contents. We're going to use the map function to process all the tokens at once and package them up in an array. For each of them, we begin by creating a copy of the token data using the toJSON method. Then we're making some checks. If the token is linked to its actor, we don't need to do anything because the previous section would have already taken care of it. If the token is not linked to its actor, then it might have overridden properties we need to migrate, might being the operative word. TokenData has a property called ActorData. It's similar to the ActorData we are used to, except that it only stores data that is different from the actor it was created from. What this means is that if the token's ActorData contains no reference to the fortune property, there's nothing to migrate because we've already taken care of it in the original actor. Otherwise, things get a bit trickier and we'll need to make some modifications to the migrateActorData function. But for this function to work in this case, we need to construct a data object to pass to the function. Remember, we're checking the type of the actor, but this information isn't present in the token's ActorData. So I'm going to duplicate the token's ActorData into a new object, to which I will add a property storing the type of actor. We can then call migrateActorData, passing it this new object. But let's finish with this bit before fixing migrateActorData. Next step is to merge any changes into the token's actual actor data before returning the token data, which will be the update data for this token. After this is all done, we create a sceneUpdate object that contains the updated tokens in its tokens attribute. Remember that in JavaScript, you have syntactic sugar if the variable has the same name as the attribute you're assigning it to. Then it's like with actors from the directory. If there was a change, we log it and update the scene document. Okay, now for that modification we needed to make. Back in migrateActorData, we've already checked that the actor type is a hero, so we know it should have a fortune property. But if it doesn't, this means we are in all likelihood dealing with an unlinked token, but this also means that setting the max fortune value will have already been taken care of by the migration of the original actor, so we need to not do anything. Finally, the last place where we might have to do some migration is in compendia. Our last loop will be going through game.packs, which contains all the compendia the world has loaded. In a normal migration script, we would ignore system packs, because you would be shipping the system with updated packs, but we need to update the system packs somehow, so might as well use this script. I'll comment this test out for now. There are many types of packs, but I'm only interested in the ones that contain actors, so I'll filter out the ones that are not actor packs or scene packs, which I can check using the packs metadata.entity property. Before we can process a pack, we need to make sure we can edit it. We can use the configure method to unlock it after we've stored the lock status so that we can restore it at the end. Next, we have to request server-side migration using pack.migrate. I have no idea why we didn't have to do that for other types of documents though. I'm only following the 5e template. If you do know, please share your knowledge in the comments. Anyway, once that migration is complete, we can do our own by grabbing the contents of the pack via the getDocuments function. Then for each document, we will do the same kind of migration we did before, based on the type of document we're processing. I should probably put the scene migration code in a function so I can reuse it here. After all the documents have been processed, we can relog the compendium if that's how we found it. And that's about it. My migration script is complete. Just need to wrap it up by setting the system migration version so that the migration script isn't run again next time the world is loaded. Now we can try the migration script on a copy of the world, which we can create by literally copy-pasting the worlds folder, renaming it, and modifying the world.json file so that it matches the folder name. As a reminder, your worlds will live in the data/worlds folder of your Foundry user data, which is located wherever you defined it in Foundry's configuration. Now let's open that world. And as we can see, all actors in this world now have their maxed fortune value set up as expected. So this was the workflow for when we added a new property and needed to move some data around. What about the case when you need to delete something from the template? If the data is truly not needed anymore, then all you need to do is remove it from the template. Foundry will automatically scrub it from the actors or items upon loading the world. Which means that if you do need to move that data around before deleting the field, then you need to do it first and then remove the property from the template in a future version of the system. Except you can't really do that. If your system is published and used by a bunch of people, you have no way of making sure that they've kept up to date with the system's most recent version. So if you assume that you've migrated the data in version n-1 and then remove the property from the template in version n, your users might lose data because it will be scrubbed before the migration script has a chance to run. For this reason, if you need to rename a property, what you actually need to do is leave the old one alone, create a new one, and copy the data over with your migration script, and keep the old one around for a while. This is why 5e has a compatible migration version number it checks against internally, so that it can say, I got tired of hanging on to old stuff and your world is too old, so things are probably going to break during this migration. Of course, if you're making a system just for yourself, you don't really have to worry about that, but do take care before attempting to remove fields from the template.json. And that's it for this one. I should point out that for the sake of simplicity and brevity, I've taken a few shortcuts by doing a very limited amount of error checking, and it's entirely possible that I've missed some corner cases. I highly encourage you to study 5e's migration script to see what else you might need to be looking out for. I'll see you next time. Bye.